that. It's really a privilege to chair this or moderate this panel on improving security governance for better business outcomes. And I have with me today three distinguished individuals. Terry Grafenstein, who you heard from earlier, who's the chair of the ISACA Board of Directors. Richard Marshall, who's the founder and chairman of the board of Centurion Group and CEO of X-SES Consultants. And Dottie Schindlinger, who's the VP and Governance Technology Evangelist. I love that title.
I like that title.
Of Diligent Corporation. I want to just set the stage as a backdrop for the discussion. Terry this morning shared with us some outcomes from the tech governance study that ISACA is releasing this morning. Just as a quick snapshot of that, the three takeaways show that 9 in 10 business leaders agree that stronger tech governance leads to improved business outcomes and increased agility. That 69% of our respondents said that their organization's leadership team should pursue clearer connection between business and IT goals. And only a little more than half indicate their organization's leadership teams are doing everything they can to safeguard key digital assets and data records. With that, I just want to turn to you and ask the question. This really brings a focus to the fact that these topics are in the boardroom. And I wonder if you would just share with us your observations about the current state of board oversight as it relates to, since we're focused on security today, but tech governance is actually much bigger than that. But what's your assessment of the current state of oversight for cybersecurity and risk management when you think about that in the context of corporate boards? Dottie, you're nodding your head. Let me go with you first.
Sure. It could be better. Let's start there. So one of the things that has been really interesting as we've been doing this research and getting to know the state around cyber risk and director competence, there's a couple of things that are happening that are a bit systemic on boards. One is that the average age of board members in the corporate space is about 63, and it's getting older every year. The other thing that is true is the level of incumbency of board members is over 8 years. And when you then ask directors how do they find new directors when it's time to bring on a new director, 93% of them say the first place they do is ask each other, who do we know? So what you can kind of imagine is that if there's not currently a high level of cybersecurity expertise on the board, with that set of factors, there's not likely to become more expertise on the board soon, right? So there's a bit of a systemic issue there.
Board members in general, and I think you'll agree with me on this, look at this as a technical problem that is to be solved by the propeller heads. Mm-hmm. And the propeller heads look at this as, this is the technical problem, just give me enough money and leave me alone and let me do my job. That's not communicating. That doesn't track. And I'm borrowing from your page, I'm sure, but my pitch to the board was, we need to be in a leadership position. That's what board members do. They lead a company. And the leadership is from the top down. And if you make sure the IT staff has all of the support they need and the understanding, and that you're very concerned about the risk, you're not too big to be hacked, you're not too smart to be hacked, and focus on what is the worst thing that can happen to us. Plan backwards. Mm-hmm. And if you figure out what's the worst thing that can happen to us and what you're going to do about it, that starts a dialogue. And that will
absolutely. So one of the things I see with cyber is we need to move away from thinking that cyber is a technology problem, mm-hmm. and it's an IT department problem. It's a business problem. Cyber is a strategic business risk. And the idea that boards somehow relinquish their oversight responsibilities because that's too hard, it's IT. Imagine if they had the same perspective on the CFO. Mm-hmm. That finance stuff, that's a little tough. We're not going to ask finance questions. I mean, that's crazy. But when I think about cyber, so if you go through, putting on my CPA hat for a minute, you can get an unmodified audit opinion and saying that everything is working in accordance with accounting standards and that sort of thing. And the next day have a massive cyber attack and breach. And you can go from being a vibrant company to one that threatens its very going concern types of things. Mm-hmm. Cyber is that important. So in terms of recruiting, we need to make sure that boards understand that they're responsible for finding people who have those skill sets. And that means breaking out Dottie's earlier point about let's just ask people we know. No, that's reckless. Eventually you're going to have a situation where you're going to have some massive attack or breach, and the board was woefully uninformed, weren't asking basic questions, because that's not doing their job. And so the thing is, they need to break out of their standard, their little mold, their little sets of circles of friends, and reach out to sort of the tech industry so that there's somebody there who understands the right
Pretty
questions.
well recognized now that the likelihood of any organization being 100% secure is not true. So what advice would you have to enabling the conversation in the boardroom?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's, I think the same principle applies whether it's in the boardroom or with a CEO and their staff, or you need to have a basis of trust, and it needs to be a safe environment. So if you have an environment where every time an employee comes to the boss, it doesn't even matter what level boss this is, but if the employee comes to the boss and the boss screams at them because they're being told bad news, the bad news stops coming. It doesn't mean that those risks have gone away. It just means that the boss no longer knows about them. And so that becomes sort of this culture of fear. And in a culture of fear, bad things happen because people are afraid to talk about problems, and then they don't get fixed. And so if you move that up to the board level, they need to make sure that they're asking good questions, but they're doing it in a way that they're all part of one team sort of thing. So you have governance, you have the board's governance, but you're still on the same team in a sense, because you really want, at the end of the day, you want what's best for the organization. You want it to be safe, secure. And so I think that you need to make sure that you're cultivating an environment where people can come to you with bad news, that they feel that they're just coming and you're going to tackle the problem together. Because if you don't do that, the problem's still there, you just don't know about it.
But the easiest way to convince the board to listen was to bring in a hired gun, an SME, a consultant. And smart consultants come in and talk to the interior people and say, where's the belly of the beast? Where do we need to focus? And since the board member is paying the consultant a lot of money up front, they listen to them. And it makes it much easier to persuade them to narrow down which set of standards they're going to use for that particular problem. And I love your approach on tailored solutions. That is so important, because if a board adopts, I want all of these done, and nothing is effective, then they blame the leadership, the CEO and the CISO.
What is your sense of what's happening now amidst all of these risk issues that are coming up? I mean, how does a board prioritize that? What do you think the ingredients are to coming together on what are the risk priorities, and this is how we're going to invest in those because it'll enable the business? What are you observing in terms of some of the chaos, Dottie?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about that as we were talking, because we have been focusing a lot on sort of cybersecurity and cyber risk, but there's sort of a whole other area of risk related to technology, and that's opportunity cost. If you don't invest in the right things, if you don't make the right moves at the right time, you can miss out on a giant amount of enterprise value that could have been created had you just, for example, invested in mobile at the right time, or whatever that is. And so, I think one of the concerns with having not enough technology expertise in the boardroom is that it's really having that clear connection, as you pointed out. They're the same thing. IT and business strategy really should be the same thing. They are the same thing.
The other thing is that from an audit perspective is that if you're in a meeting, in a boardroom, or if you're in some executive meeting, the CIO understands CIO stuff. The CFO understands CFO stuff. Logistics guy understands logistics stuff, and so on and so forth. It's very siloed. Audit oftentimes is the only one in the room that understands how all those departments snap together, and what the inherent risk is for each of those departments, and how the data flows and how they interact, and sort of the dynamics. And if audit doesn't understand that, then audit's not doing their job. And they need to step up and make sure, because they absolutely should be a key player in these types